you all. Just out of interest, how many of you are from Drenthe? Okay, about a third. How many from Friesland? Oh, and one noisy one in the back, welcome. And how many from Groningen? Imagine that. That's actually quite a nice split. I didn't realize Groningen made the most noise, but in terms of hands, it was about 30% each. So, and how many of you have come from far away to be here today? Hang on a second, I heard Noord-Holland. Don't boo. Somebody in the back's waving at me. Where did you come? Nijmegen. You know Kate will be there tomorrow, right? But I'm pleased you're here anyway, thank you. I heard that show is completely sold out. Speaking of sold out, when we, and I mean the organizing team, planned this, we had a hope that 200 people will come. Those tickets were gone in no time at all, so we said, okay, maybe we could get to 300, maybe 350. And as of this afternoon, we had 850 people registered, which is the complete room full. I noticed there's a few empty seats. We do have some train disruptions. We do believe people will come. So I got to say, it's fantastic that you guys are already here. So without further ado, yeah, give yourselves a clap. Without further ado, for those of you in Drenthe, he certainly needs no introduction, I hope. And on behalf of the northern 3 provinces, I would like to introduce Mr. Henk Brink, gedeputeerde provincie Drenthe.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, hello.
Wow.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Je mag ook in het Nederlands als je wil.
Dan gaan we het nu in het Nederland doen. It's amazing, de zaal is zo vol. Mensen, welkom. Welkom, werd al een beetje door Steven gezegd. Welkom namens de 3 noordelijke provincies. Ik zie hier voor veel jongeren zitten. Ik heb een prachtig gemengd gezelschap gezien. Je hebt al even gevraagd waar ze wegkomen. Maar ik zie jong, oud, bedrijfsleven, onderwijs, bestuurders. Fantastisch dat u er bent. Hier doen we het als Noord-Nederland voor. En mooi dat de zaal zo gevuld is vanavond.
En waarom hebben jullie als de provincies dit evenement ondersteund? Waarom is het belangrijk?
Nou ja, het is fantastisch om een mevrouw als Kate Raworth hier naartoe te halen. Om ons mee te nemen in hoe de wereld verandert. Om te kijken wat er gebeurt. Ze reist de hele wereld over. We zijn er trots op dat ze hier vanavond is. En wij willen in ieder geval ook laten zien dat we ook als noordelijke overheden. En dat doet het meestal goed dat de zaal vol zit. Dat we misschien wel naar een andere gemeenschap gaan. Dat we ook veranderingsgezind zijn. Noord-Nederland staat misschien wel eens wat bekend als waarachteraan, maar geen zin in het geval. Dit zijn allemaal mensen die nieuwsgierig zijn wat er in de wereld gebeurt. Dat we naar een betekenisvolle economie gaan. Dat geld niet alleen gelukkig maakt. En dat er heel veel zaken zijn waar je in de toekomst veel meer naar moet kijken. En het doet mij goed dat er zoveel mensen zijn.
Ik gok dat we gaan een paar lelijke dingen horen over de overheid vanavond. Want we gaan van een oude paradigma naar een nieuwe paradigma. Ben je bang voor die opmerkingen?
Nee, voor mijn gevoel, want er wordt ook wel naar mij gezegd, hè, hoe zit je er zelf in? Maar wat ik hoop vanavond is in ieder geval dat we allemaal iets mee naar huis nemen. Iets mee naar huis nemen waar u, ik, wij allemaal over nadenken. Wat gebeurt er in de wereld? Hoe kan ik daarop inspelen? Wat betekent dit voor mij, voor mijn bedrijf? Hoe moet ik als politicus daarop inspelen? En dat moet je vooral, ik heb ook gezegd als ik naar huis rijd, doe ik hoogstwaarschijnlijk hetzelfde als wat ik vorige week of gisteravond ook deed. Maar ik hoop wel dat we ons steentje bijdragen in die veranderende wereld. Want dat er veel gebeurt en dat er veel ontwikkelingen zijn waar we als Noord-Nederland gezamenlijk ook iets aan kunnen doen. Dat is voor mij zeker. En die inspiratie hoop ik dat iedereen vanavond opdoet. En dat er dan kritiek is naar mij of naar de overheid. Nou, daar moeten we maar leren mee omgaan. Daar zullen we ook weer een antwoord op geven. Maar laten we er wel een fantastische avond van maken. En nogmaals, doe er uw voordeel mee. Want u hoort vanavond heel veel mooie dingen.
Nou, eigenlijk was dat de antwoord op mijn laatste vraag. Dus, Henk, dank je wel. Mooie avond toegemeend. Sorry, ja. So, as I said, we're going to begin with the first piece. We're going to go right into it. Some of you may know him already. He's reasonably well known in the area, but some of you, this might be completely new. So I'm hoping, I say looking at him, that you're going to have a fun pre-program. This is a man who came from a world of punk rock. It's all on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. To the music business, to the advertising industry, and now, and I won't break the bit in the middle, is pioneering with other people radically new ways of doing business. His most recent book was published, I think, just a week and a half ago and is completely sold out in the Netherlands within a week. I do believe there are some copies in the foyer for sale, so if you find this story interesting, you might be able to grab one of the last versions available before the reprint. I'm going to stop talking now. Please welcome, all the way from Drouwen, Mr. Kees Kamp!
Hey folks. So why is the donut economy a potential opportunity for the northern part of the Netherlands? So I gathered some examples for which I think they give us a story that guides in the direction that, you know, the donut philosophy, the donut theory has a fruitful basis over here, which has to do with the fact that the sense of community and solidarity in the Northern Netherlands is far above average. Lots of verenigingen, cooperations over here. Groningen, koploper in lokale energiecoöperaties, social cohesion in Drenthe. And just to be sure, I know that there are most examples of Drenthe, but this is the moment that I can be proud to be an inhabitant of Drenthe, so I had to take this opportunity to, you know, put Drenthe on the table. But I know same goes for both Friesland and Groningen. So I think, but this is an assumption, and maybe it's something we can discuss later with Kate, that I think in the north of the Netherlands we know that a happy, healthy society is more than just making a lot of money. And I think this is a great starting point to look and to see how we can create this reality of the donut economy in the Netherlands. And with the serious amount of entrepreneurs that already practice the philosophy by being purposeful, socially purposeful, or environmentally purposeful companies, I think we are already seeing the road ahead. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to wish you a lot of pleasure with Kate Raworth, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Come take a bow. I seem to be missing my mic. Ah, there it is. Wow, man. That's like all the content from your new book. You just gave it away.
Yeah.
How are you going to make money with your book now?
Well, there's a bookstore here, so people can go.
But you just gave it away.
Yeah, well, that's the purpose. You know, sharing is caring.
Of course, of course. How did you find it? Was it good? Enjoy. He's very awkwardly trying to leave the stage because he knows what's coming next.
Telling a story is comfort, but
no. Oh, do I hear a little voice?
Hey, Fiddy!
Where is he?
That's my son. Hi.
What a great day.
Yes.
To be here on stage in Assen,
Yeah.
Drenthe, North Netherlands,
Yes.
talking about such amazing things on your birthday.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad that everybody came on my birthday bash.
What a party, right?
Yes.
And we don't have any cake. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
And we'll see you a little bit later. Did that make some sense to you? Does it feel obvious somehow? Because this is something I struggle with a little bit when I hear about whether you call it purposeful, betekenisvol, the donut. I think, why hasn't it always been this way? Because to me it just seems like this is how it should be. And for those in the middle and the back and the balcony, maybe you didn't notice, but I hope the front row noticed that when they look around, we gave the youngsters, the students, the front row here. Because I think for a lot of us, this might seem very obvious, but it's not what we're used to. We're hoping to inspire you folks here to make this the new normal. That's why you guys and ladies get the front seats. And also because we know you'd sit at the back and you'd be texting, so we're going to take a short break now. I did notice that there's about 180 of you so far logged into our question and answer system. So we're going to put, oh, look at that, fantastic, on the screen. Take your time, you can do this in the break. You've got about 20 minutes or so. In 25 minutes I start, whether you are in the room or not. You heard it from Kate already. Kate has arrived and we've fed her and watered her, and hopefully she's ready to start answering some of those questions about why this is not normal and how we make it normal. I'll see you guys in 20 minutes. Thank you so much. You don't have to clap me again, it's fine, it's fine. Although if you want a practice run for in about 30 seconds, you're welcome, it's up to you. Do you need it? I scored out around a 7, I know you can do better. I'm not going to talk for long, you've seen the film, you've heard about the book, you've seen or heard Case talking about practical examples. The self-titled Renegade Economist published the book in 2017, is now translated into at least 10 languages so that I could find, received a standing ovation at the prestigious TED conference, and that's not the TEDx, that's at the real TED conference in Vancouver earlier this year. I don't need to say anything more. Please give a warm North Netherlands welcome to Kate Raworth. Enjoy.
Hello. I am so delighted to be here and pretty amazed by this incredible number of you who want to come and talk about economics. Or did you want to talk about donuts? I don't know. So let me just figure out who is here. Anybody in the room, if you've ever studied economics at all, at school, at university, just put up your hand. Oh, the economists are here, fantastic. Okay, and who here cannot believe they've come to a talk with the word economics in the title? Oh yeah, that's an equal number, okay. So we're going to make this work for everybody. So let me tell you why I'm here. Well, firstly, I'm here because I think of the Tegenlicht incredible teams and meetings that you have, and the wonderful people here who said, let's organize a big community discussion. I'm so thrilled, so thank you to the organizers of this event. But another reason I'm here is because I was a teenager in the 1980s. Let's click this. Ooh, that's not on yet. There we go. There we go. I was a teenager in the 1980s. So maybe some of you were teenagers in the 1980s too. And you might remember, like I remember, there was a famine in Ethiopia. I remember being told there was a hole in the ozone layer, that there was something called climate change that was starting. I remember there was a tanker, an oil tanker called the Exxon Valdez, that tipped all of its oil in Alaska into the water. And so by the end of the 1980s, I just knew I wanted to help change the world. Who wouldn't want to help change the world? And so I thought the best thing I could do was to go to university to study the mother tongue of public policy, to study economics. Because then I would have the language that would enable me to make a difference on these social and environmental issues. So here's me going off to university, reading my first economics textbook, a fresh-faced 18-year-old, very excited. But I was really frustrated by what I was taught, because the issues I cared most about, like social justice and environmental integrity, I found they were at the margins of the syllabus. You had to hunt them down if you wanted to study that. And so instead of staying for more than 4 years to do a PhD, a doctorate, I decided to immerse myself in the real world economy. I spent 3 years working in the villages of Zanzibar with barefoot entrepreneurs who were surviving with their community, with the forest, and their wits. Then I spent 4 years working at the United Nations, writing the Human Development Report, a new imagination of what human prosperity and well-being is. Then I spent a decade working with Oxfam, campaigning to show that workers' rights in global supply chains were being exploited, campaigning to show that climate change is a matter of social justice. Then I became a mother of twins, and I began to understand gender politics, like you only do when you're changing 2 nappies at the same time. And then I realized, as I look back over my career to this point, well, every career story is really just a series of bad haircuts. That is what I said, yes. But it's also a story of what you were searching for. And I realized I had spent about 20 years of my career searching to make visible those things that were left invisible in mainstream economics. The unpaid caring work of women, exploitation of people down the end of supply chains, the impacts of climate change. And I thought, I don't want to spend the whole of my career trying to make these things visible from the margins. I want to be part of writing a new economics that puts them at the center of what we care about. So now I teach at the Environmental Change Institute in Oxford, but I have spent 5 years of my life immersed in all the economic theory that I was never taught. Ecological economics, feminist economics, institutional, behavioral, complexity economics, and I brought them together to put forward a new vision. And all through this, I was really inspired by a quote from a great inventor of the last century from the United States, Buckminster Fuller, who said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." So just before we go, let's stop, because, of course, it is important to fight the existing reality. I stand with the people who fight the excessive power of corporations, who fight the corruption that we saw revealed in the Panama Papers, who stand for democracy and human rights and political voice. And only a couple of weeks ago, I was standing with the people against fracking in Preston in the United Kingdom. So of course we must fight the existing reality. But let's go back to Bucky. We'll never change things if we only fight the existing reality. You have to build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And that's what I wanted to do. So let me take you to the heart of that new model. And I'm going to introduce you to the only donut that is any good for us. So the health warning, don't eat too many donuts. We know they're not good for us. This is the only one that actually can make our lives better. So imagine humanity's use of resources radiating out from the middle of this picture. So the hole in the middle of that donut is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life, where people don't have the resources they need to have enough food, healthcare, education, housing, energy, work, political voice. And these dimensions on the inside, I took them from the world's Sustainable Development Goals. So the governments in the world have already agreed that every person has a claim to meet these. We want to get everybody over that social foundation into the green donut itself. But, it's a big but, we cannot overshoot the outside. Because there we put so much pressure on this extraordinary, unique, delicately balanced living planet that we begin to kick her out of balance, and we cause climate breakdown. We acidify the oceans. We create a hole in the ozone layer. We create extraordinary levels of biodiversity loss and land change. And these, on the outside of the 9 planetary boundaries, first recognized by Earth system scientists nearly a decade ago. They said, we think these are the critical life-supporting systems that keep Earth as a home sweet home for humanity. So when we put those together, the challenge is to meet the needs of all people within the means of the planet. And I think this is the foundation of human well-being. Imagine laying that donut down as a foundation. When we have those foundations in place, then humanity can truly thrive with belonging, participation, culture, leisure, creativity. These are the real delicious moments of life when we feel that we are thriving. But of course we know we are far from this right now. All of that red shows you that millions or billions of people worldwide are still falling short on the essentials of life. We need to push it back. And yet we've already overshot at least 4 of Earth's planetary boundaries on climate change, biodiversity loss, excessive fertilizer use, and land conversion. So this picture is the state of humanity and our planetary home in the early 21st century. This is our selfie. And we're the first generation to see it. How are we going to turn this story around? Well, I believe many changes need to happen, but this is only telling us the global story. You probably want to think, where are we more locally? So let me show you a piece of research done by researchers in Leeds University in the UK. They've scaled the donut down for 150 countries, and I picked just two countries that happen to have 17 million people living in each of them, the Netherlands and Zambia. The way this is drawn, that when you fill in the circle with blue, that is good. You want to fill in the center circle blue without overshooting that outer ring. So you can see that at the moment, the Netherlands, on a global scale, is doing pretty well compared to the rest of the world on meeting essential human needs, but is overshooting on almost all of those planetary boundaries. Whereas Zambia is in a completely different situation. Not overshooting on almost any of the boundaries, but barely meeting its people's basic needs. So these 2 countries have very different targets for what progress looks like in the 21st century, but they both need to come within the donut. Many things need to change in the world to make this possible. I think we need new conversations in our parliaments, in boardrooms of business, in the media, and of course new public conversations, but you know what, those are already happening. And when we have those conversations, they are depending upon changing what's taught in economics departments around the world. Because I don't think today's students should be taught a mindset that will not equip them for the future that lies ahead. So let me give you a whirlwind overview of what I think are some critical new ways of thinking about the economy in the 21st century. Firstly, the first diagram that we learn in economics, those of you who learned economics, I'm going to bet you, it was this one, supply and demand. Day 1, welcome to economics, here is the market. I know, it is funny. As if the economy is the market, and the market is in equilibrium. That's a crazy place to start. I start here. I call this the embedded economy diagram. And what you've got is the economy embedded in society, its social and cultural and political institutions, embedded in the living world, drawing in energy and matter and materials from the living world, spewing out waste and pollution, and bathed in that river of solar energy. But look within the economy itself. Yes, there's the market, and there's the state, but this became a 20th century ideological boxing match. Are you a free market, laissez-faire capitalist, or a state-loving socialist? And in between that match, we lost sight of 2 other fundamental sources of provisioning. The household, where we all begin every day. The cooking, washing, cleaning, sweeping that parents do for their children, their partners, themselves, and eventually that we do for our own parents. The care of unpaid work that's so essential to our well-being. But we also lost sight of the commons, where people come together, not through the market, not through the state, but as a community, as a cooperative, as a community group, as an association, to make things happen that they collectively value. And we have a much richer view of the economy when we look at all of these together. Secondly, we need to have a richer picture of who we are in the economy, because 20th century economics told us we were rational economic man. And because he never gets drawn in the textbooks, I decided to draw a picture of him. He would look a bit like this. He'd be a man, standing alone, with money in his hand, ego in his heart, a calculator in his head, and nature at his feet. He hates work, he loves luxury, and he knows the price of everything. And the problem with his character is that when we are told that he is like us, we actually become more like him. He changes us. So we need a richer picture of who we are. We need to go from the me of rational economic man to the we of humanity. We're not just self-interested, we're socially reciprocating, cooperating, collaborating. Rather than seeing ourselves as isolated, we're deeply interdependent. We don't have fixed preferences, we have fluid values. Let me give you an example. If I gave a survey to everybody in this room about your values and your preferences, but for this half of the audience, it said on the front page, this is a consumer reaction study. And on this half of the audience, it said, this is a citizen reaction study. The research shows that you will fill it in differently, because here I activated the consumer, and here I activated the citizen. So even the name by which we are called changes how we respond. Rather than seeing us as work-hating, I think it makes more sense to see us as purpose-seeking. And those are the lucky people for whom work and purpose come together. And we are not at the pinnacle of life, dominant over nature. We're embedded in the web of life and dependent upon it. So when we put these together, we can begin to realize that mainstream economics represented us in the market as the consumer or as the producer, but we have many other richer identities that we need to reclaim. In the state, we're a citizen, a voter, a service user. But in the household, we are a parent, a neighbor, a partner, a friend. And in the commons, we are collaborator, we share, we repair, we steward resources. And all of these identities belong to us, and we need them to make this new economy work. What about how we're going to get into the donut? I think we need to put two principles of design at the heart of 21st century economics, to create economies that are regenerative and distributive by design. And let me tell you a little bit about those. I believe that the industries we've inherited are degenerative by design. I'll show you with a bit of hosepipe. Never travel without hosepipe, it's very useful. Right? 20th century economies, we take Earth's materials, we put them in the tube, we turn them into stuff, and then we throw away the waste. And that runs against the cycles of the living Earth. We need to bend that around and create circular economies where resources are never used up, but are used again and again. Now, one of the challenges that we've got is that if individual companies try alone to create a circular economy, I don't think we're going to get to where we need to be. Let's imagine this is the clothing company, where my jacket comes from, and they say, send it back to us, we'll turn the textiles back into fibers, and we'll make it again. Could I just ask you to hold that circle, sir? There we are. And then another clothing company says, well, hang on, but then send your clothes back to us, and we'll make it into another loop. So could you hold that, madam? There we are. Now we've got the beginnings of a circular economy. Now I want everyone in the room to imagine that the shirt or jacket on your back, the company that made that says, send it back to us and we'll recycle it. Just make a little loop above your head, imagining that, yeah, really, I'm asking you to do this. Imagine it. Oh, yes. This is the beginning of a little circular economy. You look beautiful. But if we did that, nature would laugh at us, because nature doesn't turn a daffodil into a daffodil and a peacock into a peacock. Nature, she creates an ecosystem. She makes all of the resources break down and be used again and again. And if we're going to truly create a circular economy, we need to go above the individual company and create an ecosystem of metals, of plastics, of textiles, of ceramics, so that resources become an ecosystem, not individual little loops. How are we going to make that happen? One place where they're trying to make that happen is in Glasgow. Looking across the city, how can we create loops? This is for the bread, meat, and beer. I think this tells you something about the Glaswegian diet. But how can we create a city-wide circular economy where we join those loops up? What about distributive by design? 20th century industries, I think, were centralized in their technologies and their institutions. And we have an opportunity that's unprecedented to create distributed design. Let me give you some examples, and I think they'll be familiar to you here. We've got the possibilities of cooperatively owned housing, where the members of the housing co-op together own the housing and rent it and pay that rent together collectively, rather than owned by individual landlords in the city like London, where I was born, charging extortionate levels of rent. Political voice, ensuring that communities like this one in the United States, communities have a voice and a say in the decision-making, distributing that power to the place where it actually affects people's lives. We've got here employee-owned companies, 20th century corporations, shareholder-owned, centralized capital, and paid most of the profits out to shareholders. We've got the beginnings of employee-owned and cooperatively owned business revolution going on. Renewable energy networks, building solar panels into the roof of households like this in Germany. Transport networks, this is the longest cycle route now built in a city in China, 5 miles, and it goes under the motorway, so you stay dry while you're on your bike. And information networks, the knowledge commons in fab labs and maker spaces, so citizens can access the open source, open data, Creative Commons licensing that is a global network of knowledge. These examples, I hope, are familiar, because the wonderful thing about this new economy is it's popping up everywhere. It's coming from bottom up, and people are making it happen. Let me give you one example of a place in Sweden where they're trying to design the donut from the start. I was contacted by an urban design team who told me, we're making a new suburb here just under the motorway. There's an area of land that's going to be turned into homes for about 14,000 houses. And they said, we're calling it a donut district. I thought, what have I done? Everybody's talking about donuts. And they said, we want to make it every household will be 200 meters from a mobility hub, from transport. So you won't jump in a car, because 200 meters away is a tram or bus station or access to cargo bikes, 200 meters from green space, and 200 meters from a school or a health center or a community space. This will be a great place to live, and to live well. And here they've just begun planning the layout so they can have local amenities spread out, but transport available throughout, with little hubs where you can pick up your deliveries, where you can hop on a bike or hop on a tram, but building the circular economy in from the beginning, and building in ecosystem services so that there are pollinators flying throughout, keeping that ecosystem alive with green roofs. To me, this is so exciting that designers are beginning to try to bring these ideas together in new urban places. But I want to finish by thinking about the world of business, because enterprise, whether it's a social enterprise with 3 employees or a Fortune 500 company with 10,000 employees, can business help bring us into the donut? I've talked to many, many companies over the last 5 years and shown them the donut diagram. And some at one end of the spectrum will say, well, it's a sad story, but the business of business is business. And everything we're doing is nearly legal, so we'll just keep carrying on until the rules change. But then others say, this is what we're here for. This is why we set up a business, to help tackle these kinds of problems. And to me, I think this is evidence that we are living through a fascinating psychological drama. A drama between what I would call the 20th century extractive mindset and the 21st century generative mindset. The 20th century mindset still asks one overriding question, and you can hear it in the financial pages, in the financial reporting, and when you hear large companies speak. It's the question, how much financial value can we capture from the way we design this enterprise? The 20th century was run on the basis of this question. But when I talk to innovative urban designers, innovative companies, and many of the companies that Case was just talking about, they're asking a very different question. How many benefits for society, for the community, for the culture, for the living planet, how many benefits can we layer into the way we design this? What is it that leaves some companies over there still on the extractive question while others are in this generative space? And here I turn to the work of Marjorie Kelly, a business analyst, who has come up with 5 design traits for companies. First, what is your purpose as an enterprise? An extractive company might say, well, we want to be the biggest player in our sector and have the largest market share. A very narrow purpose. A generative company, I heard Case saying earlier before, I don't employ people to make cookies, I make cookies to employ people. A completely different kind of purpose, to create jobs. Secondly, how are you governed? What are the kind of discussions that happen when the governing board get together? What are the principles by which the companies run? And the metrics that drive the idea of progress and success. Many of these companies, and I speak to people who work in them, say, every quarter we have to show our shareholders that we have growing sales, growing market share, and growing profits. And they're caught in measuring themselves against these very narrow metrics. 21st century generative companies set themselves targets of being carbon neutral, of creating employment for those who haven't had it, of generating fun, totally different kind of metrics. How is the company networked? How does it relate to its suppliers? How does it relate to its customers, its competitors, its collaborators in the community? Because are those networks pulling you back towards the extractive mindset or enabling you to move forward into the generative one? And now let's go deep. Let's go deep into the roots of this design. How is the company owned? Because whether a company is owned by its employees, by a family, by private investors, or by shareholders, this has a huge implication for the kind of finance that stands behind the company and what that finance demands. And what I think we're witnessing in the middle of this psychological drama is many companies that feel torn in two, because think of some big companies you know, they may have changed their purpose. They may have given themselves a really great new purpose, transforming their governance and transforming the networks they're part of, but they're still owned by the stock market, which means they're still pulled back by this demand from shareholders to have growing sales, growing market share, growing profits every single quarter. And so this tears them in two and means they often get stuck. And I think to complete the transformation that is ongoing towards generative design, we need to see all those arrows pointing in the same direction, which is why we need new business models, whether it's employee ownership, whether it's cooperatives, community interest companies, not-for-profits, B corporations. All of these are innovations that align ownership with generative value. And we need new kinds of finance that actually back it up. I have to say, when Triodos Bank opened its current accounts in the United Kingdom this time last year, I immediately signed up because I want my money to be saving with a bank that I know is committed to lending to people who are generating social and environmental return as well as a fair financial return. I want to be part of the generative economy. So we need to have what businesses can do to transform themselves, but they also need an enabling business environment which can be enabled by the local government and the national government, and of course internationally, needs to move us to this generative future. We are living in the middle of this psychological drama, and I think some of the conversations we're going to have this evening will pin us right back into the heart of that challenge. So let me wrap this up here and say that if you like the sound of donut economics, you are welcome to watch these videos online. They're each 1 minute long. As you can see, they're silly, they're playful, they're funny. 21st century economics has to be fun if we're all going to be part of the transformation. And there's an ongoing discussion group online if you want to be part of talking about and learning from what others are doing elsewhere in the world. So let me leave you where I began, with the only donut that turns out to be good for us. and let's get on with the conversation. Thank you very much.
I love that you get to bring your props, but customs, hose pipes.
They let me through, but I'm going home with a donut badge. Let's see if I get through.
Yeah, and I've already seen a few of the questions that you guys have been sending in. I get them on my laptop, and we're kind of overwhelmed already, so we're not going to get to all of them. But somebody said, Kate, come on, a donut. This is possibly the worst possible symbol for what you're trying to put forward. But I'm going to put it back to you guys and say, did you know the donut was invented here, right in the Netherlands?
No.
Yeah, the actual donut, not your donut, of course. So I think we should just leave that there.
Well, I think sometimes you have to be silly, you know, and you have to be playful. And if I had called this book, you know, The Good Life Economy, maybe only a few people would have picked it up. But by calling it the donut economy, you already know it's silly, it's playful, it's accessible. And like I said, this is the only donut that's actually going to turn out to be good for us.
Yeah, I actually tweeted that, so
Okay,
thanks for the sound bites. I'm just going to give you a second to calm down. I know what it's like to give a talk like that, get such a round of applause. This has kind of like been your life's work, and now in the last, I guess, year or so, it's propelled into a proportion that I don't know whether you expected or not, but the book is out, 10 different languages, you're standing on the stage of TED in Vancouver with, you know, quite some movers and shakers. How does that feel?
I never, ever expected, never imagined. And so it's had traction way beyond what I could have hoped for. To me, it gives me energy and gives me hope, because it's absolutely clear that there is a hunger for a new story and a new vision. I wrote this book in my head. When I was writing, I was thinking about the economic students who, like myself 25 years ago, was deeply frustrated by what I was being taught. And I wanted to write a book so that the students could think, you know, if the theory you're being taught doesn't make sense to you, it's not you, it's the theory. And so I focused on them. And what I've been delighted about is that many students have really responded well to it and loved it, but businesses are saying, we want to use these ideas in practice. Cities, we want to put these into our design of future neighborhoods. Politics, I never expected politicians to come to this, because I didn't in any way try to limit what I wrote about to make it easy and accessible for today's politicians. Yeah. But the fact that they're coming, I was in the Parliament this afternoon giving a presentation.
Yeah, so for the audience, Kate came directly from House of Representatives, you know it as the Tweede Kamer, on invitation of one of the political parties, I believe. What happened? I mean, you're sitting with a government.
I know, there's a moment you think, how did I get here? And it was fantastic, and there were members of Parliament from across the political spectrum. And
that's quite broad here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, that is quite broad. To be honest, the first thing that went through my mind is, I really can't imagine this happening in the UK. I don't feel that we have, well, you know we're a little bit lost in the UK right now, right? But we don't have this sort of open political conversation. In fact, I think we are lost off negotiating something, you know, the bee that shall not be named. Instead of focusing on the transition that actually needs to happen. And so it was lovely to be in a place where people were just focused on moving ahead. How do we need to make change happen?
So you said we're not going to mention it, but that means we have to mention it. Brexit, donut economics. I mean, these two worlds seem so far apart.
Yeah.
What can they do? I mean...
I think, well, my personal view on Brexit is that people voted because they wanted change, and they were offered one big button with a big B on it, and so people pressed that button. I think many people in the UK are realizing that this is not turning out to be the change we wanted, and I see the politicians wanting to create some sort of free trade, free market, going really in the opposite direction of this, competitive, going back into sort of old school competitiveness.
And actually we're hearing it from the US as well, trade sanctions, trade tariffs.
Yeah. Countries retreating into a very old style, and so it's all the more important that countries like the Netherlands, like other European countries, actually forge ahead, like the New Zealand, and forge ahead, say, we're not going to be distracted by the fact that you're getting caught up somewhere else. We're going to keep modeling the kind of future that we need to have. You'll catch up with us one day.
Yeah. So you said I didn't dare hope, but surely you wrote this book and this theory because you had hope.
Oh, I had hope for making sense of a new vision. I didn't have any hope or expectation that it would have the kind of traction that it's had. But it just makes me very angry in my belly. When I teach in Oxford University now, I teach in the Environmental Change Institute there, but sometimes I sit in on the economics lectures. You know, I was a student nearly 30 years ago. But first lecture, welcome to economics. Here is supply and demand, you know. The diagrams don't mention the living world. The living world, if you want to talk about climate change or biodiversity loss or chemical pollution, we have 2 words for that you can use. Environmental externality. I mean, this is an alarm bell. If we're talking about the breakdown of the living planet on which our lives depend as an externality, this clearly is not going to go well. So it just makes me so angry that students who, like myself, in the 80s, now today, with the magnification of the challenges we face, they want to be part of change in the future. They come to study economics and they're taught a mindset that literally I think is hundreds of years out of date. It makes me so angry on behalf of them. They have a right to be taught a mindset that will equip them for the future that they already know is coming, which is why the students have created an international movement called Rethinking Economics, saying we already know that the syllabus you're teaching us isn't equipping us for the future. Teach us a wider set of ideas to give us half a chance of managing this well.
I don't know if you noticed. Well said. I don't know if you noticed, but when you asked the question who has or is studying economics,
there was quite a lot of hands.
A lot of hands go up, but did you notice how many were in the front rows?
Oh, they always sit near the front. Thank you.
Well, so what we actually did is we made sure the students of today are actually...
Hey!
So if you're a student today studying anything that includes economics, put your hand up so Kate can see where you are.
Hey!
So
brilliant.
These are those people.
Yes.
And was Kate right? Are you still getting supply and demand as the sort of 101 of what drives economy? I'm getting a lot of heads nodding. It's not your fault. It's okay. What you do next, however, you'll have to decide at the end of the evening. Kate, we agreed to get this really down and deep with local issues.
Yeah.
So we lined up 4 videos for you from people who have a question.
Yeah.
They're going to give you some context. You'll be able to see it here with the subtitles. And then we're going to invite a guest on stage to have a bit of a discussion about that.
Brilliant.
So I would love to get right into the first film clip, which is talking about education. I work also quite a lot with economics of one of our local cities, Groningen, if you didn't know. And we realized that education is really, really critical because that's the future of your economy, right? Whatever we're teaching today is what we're going to get in 5, 10, 20 years. So we really wanted to make sure we get education in, try to find some context with how does this fit with your theories or models of donut economics. So I'm going to ask the guys behind me without turning around if they can roll the film from Stenden.
Mijn naam is Margriet Venema. Ik ben een gezondheidswetenschapper, student hier aan de NHL Stenden Hogeschool. Ik studeer Master Digitale Innovatie in Zorg en Welzijn en ik ben nauw betrokken bij het honorsprogramma. Nou, wat we hier op deze school echt anders proberen te doen, is door het middel van design-based education te zorgen dat we de maatschappij bij de school betrekken, waardoor we studenten eigenlijk de kans bieden om hun kennis naast het studeren, tijdens het studeren al in te zetten in de praktijk. Nou, waar we tegenaan lopen is dat we het heel lastig vinden om bedrijfsleven en de maatschappij mee te nemen in het gedachtegoed dat het out of the box denken en het pure van een student in zijn studententijd juist heel erg waardevol is. Het NHL Stenden heeft het Congresfestival georganiseerd. Dat is een 3-daags evenement waarin ondernemers, maatschappij en de studenten samen laten zien wat ze in de afgelopen jaren gemaakt hebben. Dus het is een soort levend bewijs van wat wij graag in het groot zouden willen doen. Hoe zorgen wij ervoor dat de barrières tussen de kennisinstelling en de omgeving weggehaald worden, zodat beide partijen daar rijker van worden? We zien dat we het hier in het klein al kunnen, maar wij vragen ons af hoe je het in het groot doet.
And so I'd love to invite Margriet to come and join us on the podium. Hi, welcome.
Dankjewel.
I'm going to give you the microphone.
Ja, zeker weten.
Meet Kate,
Hi.
please take a seat.
Nice to meet you.
I'm going to sit sort of awkwardly behind
Oh, okay.
you, so just pretend I'm not here. And so I think the question is pretty clear, right? But it suggests that there is a barrier between the schools, the knowledge institutes, and the stuff that's happening around them. So maybe it's worth just highlighting a little bit of the context of what are those barriers that you find?
Well, I think everyone's kind of open to make this work, but what we experience and practice is that it actually doesn't work out that way, because people seem to find it very hard to really be open to students to enhance their bright, new, fresh ideas, and really have to get out of their comfort zone to give that sort of room, make space for those students and let them think the way they want to think and be open to use that for new insights.
So, Kate, I mean, you teach at Oxford. You should be somewhat familiar with the educational world, at least I hope. Have you come across this already? Have you seen examples?
Yeah, and I think it's quite widespread that universities are realizing they need to come outside from their walls and really want to connect with innovation and be part of it, exactly as you described in the film. So you're doing a master's in digital innovation in health and welfare. That sounds fantastic and fascinating in itself.
It is.
I mean, just reflecting on that, you know, now that nearly everybody has a little computer in their pocket, I know there are many possibilities. For example, in the UK, around £300 million, around 300 million euros, is wasted every year on prescription medicines that people forget to take. And one experiment, which has been turned into a policy, found that if you send people a text just reminding them to take their medicine, it massively improves. So is this the kind of policies around digital innovation and health that your work is researching and exploring?
Yes, I co-founded my own startup where we develop a product that helps people with chronic pain, which is one of those examples. But I was actually able to do that because I asked the place where I did my internship to not make me think the same way as they did and let me develop and create something that had a societal value. And I've been quite hard on them to let me think in that way, and I did succeed, and the results are pretty awesome. But I actually want to help the university and entrepreneurs and businesses around the university to do exactly the same, because then we can make it on amazing things together. Yeah. There are barriers like minds of people that think that they are open to students and to new ways of thinking, but I experience that to really be open to that is quite hard for people.
Well, that's fascinating cultural shift that needs to take place and must be beginning to take place, because from all the ideas that I've been presenting and that we know need to happen to transition to a new economy, we need to do many things in new ways. And so many of the cultural habits and the social designs that we have now will need to be reinvented, many of them with this digital technology at its heart. So what the work you're doing is key, and figuring out how to better create a web of student learning and social use is going to be essential. I know you mentioned in the film that you use design-based education, and I know that at the heart of design thinking is putting the user at the center. So you're probably already doing this, but I would imagine, you know, if students could go to community groups without an initial agenda, but saying, what do you need to know? What do you wish worked better? What do you want to find out? And designing the research around the needs. You're already doing this, of course, right? Designing the research around the needs that exist there. So I think that's one place. At the other end, and I don't know anything about the way your university is presenting, although your congress will look fantastic, academia has a tradition of going, you know, we come and do research from you, collect lots of information from you, and then going off and writing it up in a journal that appears 2 years later, and nothing comes back. And so there's also a reinvention that needs to happen within academia. I'm imagining it's happening where you are, of making those findings relevant, making them actually turn into new practices, presenting them and communicating them in ways that those users understand. And I noticed at the end of the video, you said, how can we tear down the barriers? As a mother of twins, I always say to myself, I don't have time to knock on shut doors. So I've given up with tearing down barriers, but what I do is look for where the doors are open. And like Buckminster Fuller, say, how do we build a new model? So look for where the energy is and demonstrate, as I'm sure you're doing, demonstrate how it's working, where it's working, and build those relationships, rather than focusing on the frustration of the inertia that's locked in. But I'm betting you're doing a lot of all this already.
Well, I try to, but it's good to hear that you think the same way.
Yeah, but the power of nudge technologies, nudging people with a text, is huge. And governments are beginning to realize that rather than taxing somebody, a nudge with a text can deeply change the way we respond to opportunity and the way we remember to take our medicines. Writing a text, if somebody's going to a job centre looking for a job and an advertisement comes up, in the UK they found that if they just write, dear Nick, good luck in your interview today, Nick is going to be about 30 times more likely to turn up for that interview than if it just says, go to your interview at 2 p.m. So small changes in the design deeply affect us, like whether we call ourselves consumer or citizen, whether we feel that we're named and recognized. So the work you're doing, I think, is at the heart of the kind of cultural change we need. So all force to what you're doing, because we really need to learn how to make this connection work much better.
So it sounds to me that there's a sort of two-pronged impact here. There's keep doing it and show what you're doing.
Demonstrate the positive.
But also, how do we now get that back into the design of education itself?
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is currently, you feel it's not normal, which is why you're finding these barriers.
No, I do. When you talked about science, academics, it's something that I experience as well. It's all these little islands that could really enhance each other and bring out the best in each other, and then we have great results, and we already have them. But I don't know if they have enough weight to make people aware that this way, working this way, or studying this way actually, gives good results. So I'm wondering if the weight is enough, or if we should do more about that. And you just mentioned communication. I think that's a very important thing as well. I think quite often we're shy and not really proud of what we're doing, because it's new and it's maybe not always backed by science and all those kind of things, but it's important. So I do agree on that as well.
And certainly I know in the UK, in the design of funding for research, about 8 or so years ago, a new requirement came in that academic researchers had to show or describe how their work was going to have impact. And I was working at Oxfam at the time, and we were suddenly contacted by lots of universities wanting to work with NGOs to have impact. To me, this is one way that, putting the requirement in, show us how this research is going to have impact, show us how you're going to communicate it and bring it back to the community from whom you gathered that data. These are really important ways of closing that loop of knowledge and relevance, and making sure that academia, for academics, there's so much pressure to get published in the right journals at the right time, to get the promotion, to get the to become a professor. There's a real responsibility to the community as well, from whom all that data was gathered. And some communities become tired of becoming research subjects. People come all the time and collect data from us. We never see any change. So that's a really important part of the relationship as well, the obligation to actually deliver value back to those from whom the data was gathered.
Fabulous. Thank you both so much. I'm sure we could continue this for hours, but we've got 3 other films to get through. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Margriet. Thank you so much. So we're going to go from the world of education to the world of business. Also important, you already described it as potentially a powerful force for good. So can we run the next video? Thank you.
Ik ben Anneloes Oldenburger en ik ben derde generatie in het familiebedrijf Virol. Binnen Virol ben ik verantwoordelijk voor Virol e-waste. En wij sorteren en demonteren hier elektronisch afval. En dat doen we met mensen met een afstand tot de arbeidsmarkt. Wij zijn een familiebedrijf, we bestaan 50 jaar. Wij hebben hier speciaal voor gekozen om het met de hand te doen, om extra werkgelegenheid te creëren. Zeker in een gebied waar werkvoorzieningschappen de grootste werkgever zijn. En het is een mooi voorbeeld van circulaire economie. We leiden mensen duurzaam op, minder grondstoffen uit de natuur en we plaatsen mensen terug op de arbeidsmarkt. Kandidaten die gaan 3 tot 4 dagen in de week aan het werk en 1 dag naar school. Ze krijgen een opleiding terwijl ze werkzaamheden uitvoeren met elektronisch afval. En daar proberen wij kandidaten terug te krijgen naar de arbeidsmarkt. Dus we leiden ze eigenlijk op richting een betaalde baan en we laten ze wennen aan het arbeidsproces. We hebben hier heel veel projecten, heel veel elektronisch afval wat we graag willen demonteren. We hebben werkplekken genoeg. De grootste uitdaging is dus nu om kandidaten te krijgen voor dit werkleertraject. De arbeidsmarkt trekt aan. Hoe kunnen de overheid, onderwijs en ondernemers nog beter samenwerken om dit soort werkleertrajecten tot een succes te maken?
Please welcome on stage Anneloes Oldenburger. What a fabulous smile.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Now, we're going to make this easy for Anneloes. Anneloes is a little bit nervous about her English.
You should hear my Dutch.
I was just going to say, I think you have the inverse problem. So we're going to try and do a little bit of real-time translation stuff here.
Okay.
What could possibly go right? Maar je gunt ons, toch? So, perfect. If I read through the lines here, your question is, how can we get more people?
Yes.
I think there's people enough already. I think there are some challenges that are getting between the wonderful business that you're trying to create that is looking at both sides of the donut already, right? Taking care of people, but also recycling. And it seems to me, and we talked a little bit before, so the audience shouldn't be surprised here, one of your challenges is we have a governmental system and a financial benefit system for the or underemployed or the unemployable, whatever that might mean, that comes from an old world and you're trying to push into a new world, and somewhere in the middle there is friction.
Yes.
Do you have any experience with this sort of thinking through your donut economics of, you put it right in the middle. We got to take care of our people. But we got an old system that says, well, if you're fit for work, then you should go to work, which means you don't qualify for something like this, but you lose your benefits. Meanwhile, we have people that don't fit that pattern.
Yeah. If I could just ask if we could put the donut slide back up on the screen, that would be great, because I think the work that your company is doing, as Nick just said, that's great. So what I'm hearing, what I see from the video is on the inside, it's providing income and work for people. It's also providing a new education because there's a new skill being learned. But on the outside, and also it's providing more social equality because it's enabling those who don't have work to bring themselves back into society. So it's touching on several things on the inside. But then on the outside, by recycling these machines and not just shredding them into metal, but taking them apart, this starts to create the circular economy. It cuts down carbon emissions. It reduces chemical pollution. So this is absolutely an enterprise that can help bring humanity into the donut economy, which is so important, why it's so important that this kind of initiative is helped to make it work. And let me just go back to that ecosystem I was talking about, right? So what I see in your company is creating an ecosystem of metal use and reuse. And at every little node on this ecosystem are jobs. And we don't yet know what those jobs look like because we're only just inventing this circular economy. So at the moment, you know what some of them look like, but this is going to keep evolving over time, which means that people will continually need retraining and new skills. And the new generation who are coming through will need to have continual skill training and retraining as a lifelong skill itself, which means people need to become used to learning new skills, but governments also need to be good at enabling people to have that skills training. So I don't know enough about the specific details of the local situation here, but it's clear to me that this is the kind of thing we need to learn how to make it work. Learning and relearning and new learning skills will be something that will be essential to make this circular economy work.
So how do we, and I'm going to use the word make, and of course we can't necessarily make them do anything, but how can we get the government at whatever level, local, national, regional, international, if that exists, to start to really embrace this? I mean, we're lucky enough to have some political people in the room today. Henk from Drenthe, you met him in the break. They're here listening, but I can well imagine that they are stuck in a system that has rules and regulations, and can we just switch that off? I'm guessing not, but...
I imagine the first thing, maybe this has already happened, but the first thing you'd want to do is sit down with everybody who has a stake in this situation, with yourself from the company, with some of the people who are part of your scheme, with people who for some reason can't be part of the scheme, with the government employees who are running the scheme, everybody talking, because this is the beginning of redesigning the system. What's not working? And everybody listening and realizing that nobody's intentionally being bad here. We are structured under some rules that might have been inherited from an old economy that aren't yet fit for the agile nature of the new economy we need. So I would start there with a conversation, trying to understand why we are getting stuck, and use what Margriet was talking about, some of that design thinking, about where are the places we can unstick this. But the challenge that is happening in many societies is people who are on unemployment benefits or unable to work benefits. It's very difficult for them to come back in because there's a risk of losing those benefits. This is why countries like Finland trialed what they called a guaranteed basic income for people on long-term unemployment, precisely so that they didn't run into this problem, so that they could then begin coming into the world of work, but they knew that income was there. And I don't know, we don't yet know the results from Finland, but from other countries there's evidence that when people know there's a secure, basic amount of money is there, they actually are able to take more risks. They're actually able to, somebody's there ready to take those risks. Actually, because when people's lives are very vulnerable, they can't afford to take a risk. So when you have a basic security, you can afford to take a risk, try something, experiment. That's the kind of security that needs to exist so that people can step into these schemes and learn new skills. And maybe it turns out not to be the right skill. There's going to be a lot of trial and error and learning and relearning that goes on in this process. We won't get it right the first time. So there has to be space for learning in how we design the new economy.
Is this helping?
Yes.
See, you speak great English.
Yeah.
I have actually a question from the audience that talks, because we're talking about the business world here. You guys are doing a fantastic job, so just please don't stop, whatever it takes. But the question from Leontina Wiesling, who lives in Groningen, says, hey, look, there's another side of business. We see a lot of companies using the energy transition and the word sustainability, these kind of terms, to create new products or new services, but they're not actually changing the way they do business. So it's kind of like old business, new jacket with all the right fancy terms. What do you see the possibilities of the donut economics in forcing that next step to actually doing it, like Annelies?
So I would go back to that signboard that I showed. And really to think about whether enterprises are being part of this transformative story, I would ask them those 5 design traits. Tell me what your purpose is. Tell me how you govern yourselves. How are you networked with your suppliers, your customers, with the local government support system? How are you owned? And therefore, what kind of finance is coming to you? And are these in line? And if they're not in line, if it's, like you say, old business in a new jacket, then I think you get that split personality. And you get companies that are trying to transform but stuck. Yeah. So I think this is, I sometimes call it corporate psychotherapy. Because when people go to a psychotherapist, they might say, I have relationships with all these really difficult people, and I need you to help me get on with them. And then the more psychotherapy they do, they realize, it's not them, it's me. and I need to transform. And for me, I think this comes to the business as well. It's not just the difficult business environment, it's sometimes the design of the enterprise itself that needs to change, but also the regulatory environment in which it's working needs to change to enable it to be part of, to change not just its jacket, but to change its soul.
Yeah, so a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we need to empower essentially the consumer to start asking the right questions. So your signpost starts that movement of what are the right questions we need to ask, and how do we see beyond the, I don't want to say lies, that might imply bad motivation, but if somebody is saying all the right things, how do you see beyond it?
Yeah, and empower us as consumers, but empower us as citizens, empower us as members of the commons, and as householders, because we encounter companies in all these different facets of our lives, and to ask whether the way the company is behaving really is respecting the generative future that we want to make, and if it's not, what's stopping it? Where is it held up in those different ways it's designed?
Yeah, fabulous, thank you. Annalise, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
And I'm not sure if you need to take a breath or not, but we're going straight into number 3. Conveniently or coincidentally, a few weeks ago when you mentioned it on stage, you were in a city in the UK called Preston, joining what looked like a rally or a march or a protest of some sort against the fracking, the gas extraction. We talked a little in our preparation that we have similar issues here in the north. We are the energy industry. It creates a lot of jobs. It creates quite a lot of wealth if you talk about, national GDP level stuff. But this video from Geert de Vries, who lives in a small village called Overschild, shows us sort of other side of what happens. Can we roll that video?
Ik ben Geert de Vries. Ik woon al 30 jaar in Overschild. Wij wonen hier natuurlijk heel prima. Het enige probleem is dat die aardbevingen door de gaswinning ons huis langzaam in barrels omtovert. En dat is niet alleen ons huis, maar dat zijn veel meer huizen. We hebben in het dorp ons georganiseerd om te kijken wat de beste oplossingen zouden zijn met deze opgave. We hebben 15 mensen hier in het dorp, van een klein dorp eigenlijk, want er wonen hier maar 250 mensen. Hebben we wekelijks bij elkaar gezeten en meer dan een jaar lang en een witboek geproduceerd. En in dat witboek hebben wij eigenlijk vanuit de bewoner geredeneerd hoe we het proces het beste vorm zou kunnen geven. De factor geld speelt natuurlijk een grote rol in dit verhaal, omdat de versterking heel veel geld kost. Dat is zonder twijfel zo. Maar er is ook heel veel geld verdiend aan het gas. Moeten wij nu wachten op politici die fatsoenlijk en eerlijk handelen en de donateurie inderdaad ook aanhangen? Of moeten wij zorgen dat geld, omdat het zo'n belangrijke rol speelt, ook een goede rol kan gaan spelen in de donortheorie?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Geert de Vries. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Hi, good to meet you.
So, what a tricky subject. Money.
Money.
We seem to can't live without it, but how do we live without it?
So let me just understand a little bit more about the situation. You've got cracks in the side of your house.
Well, it is a long story, of course. Gas has been explored since the 1960s in Groningen. And since the 90s, we have earthquakes, which became worse and worse. And since the last 10 years or so, it's obvious that we need reinforcement of the houses. And also, of course, the damage that has been caused needs to be repaired. The problem is money, because the exploration company, the NAM, Shell, Exxon, they are hesitant to pay, of course, the damages. They try to get away from it. And our government now has said that they will take over control. And 3 years ago, they started the calculations of houses to see whether they need to reinforced or maybe rebuilt. And the end of the story in our village, 80% of the houses need to be rebuilt because it is cheaper than reinforcing them. That is, again, money.
And so rebuilt in this example means flatten them and then rebuild something new.
Wow.
So we feel that we are inside your donut.
Pushed into the middle of it.
Yeah.
But not necessarily in a good way.
Well, it reminds me of the fracking case that's happening in the UK, in Preston. What happened in Preston was the company applied for licenses. The local council and the local community said, we don't want this. Actually, we don't want fracking here. But then the national government said, you're going to have it anyway, and overruled what the local community had decided. So there is vigorous protest every day. And I made a big sign saying, don't frack with the donut. Right. Precisely because I think that it, as you've described, it undermines your secure housing. I imagine it has effect on house prices.
Health.
There can be stress.
Peace and justice.
Peace and justice. But also certainly some kinds of fracking that are going on in the UK, a threat to the groundwater supplies. A lot of chemicals are being used. And at the same time, what we're doing in terms of energy, let's take the long view, we're continuing to use fossil fuels, which contribute to climate change. So I believe that our children's children, and Casey's little 5-year-old boy, when he's old enough to understand this, he'll say, I'm sorry, could you explain to me again why in 2018, when we knew everything that we know about climate change, we were still putting more money into underground sources of gas and fossil fuels. In the UK, they tell me, well, it's a bridge fuel. And I think, a bridge to where? I see it as a tunnel fuel that goes down deeper and deeper and deeper into the fossil fuel industry. But this is fascinating that the cheapest, and now we're talking about money, the cheapest thing to do is to flatten your house and rebuild it. Well, one of the things we know from the circular economy is that if you want to minimize material use and carbon emissions, you restore and you regenerate and you refurbish existing buildings. You don't flatten them and build again. So this is even more adding to the material and energy footprint of the country. I mean, the way you, from what I know, from what you describe, the behavior of Shell and Exxon, if it's as you describe, it's, to my mind, exactly that extractive mindset. How much gas can we extract from below the land? And by the way, how much financial value can we extract from this enterprise? And to me, that really should be left in the 20th century. I believe, again, our children's children will say, why did you take so long to move from fossil fuels, from looking down for energy to looking up for energy, to the sun, the wind, the waves, to a renewable energy system, which, by the way, creates many more jobs. There are nearly twice as many jobs in the United States in renewable energy as there are in the old coal mining. It's the future, and it's the technological future. And the north part of the country, you're top Dutch here, right? It's the place where you have the ideas, the universities, the technologies. This can be a place where those new technologies come from. So to me, this is like the last gasp of the fossil fuel industry, holding on and trying to extract just that last bit of money from beneath your houses. And I think we'll look back in the history books and think, wow, did it really take so long to let go?
Can I share a next trick of our government? Our Minister Wiebes has decided to end the gas extraction in 12 years. But he also says, because I decided this, the earthquakes will disappear. That means we don't need to reinforce our houses anymore.
This is the houses that are potentially already damaged.
Wow. Well.
That's our government. Really nice. And that's why my question is, do we need honest and truthful minister or government? Or do we need to find a way how money plays a role for us?
And what do you mean by that?
That means that then we need a lot of money, of course, to reinforce the houses. And the government probably thinks, well, that money is lost because it doesn't give us anything back. You put money in an area, Groningen, it never comes back, it never pays out. And we probably need to find ways to show that it does pay out, because it's people that it concerns, people that are, of course, important in economy as well.
I don't know enough about the details of this case, or indeed the way that most cases are arranged, but I'm just amazed that there wasn't something written into the contract of the companies that are going to extract from under the land that says, and if damage appears in any of the structures owned by our citizens, you will be liable to pay for those costs, because that is a cost of your business.
It's true. That was up till the minister decided to turn down the gas production. Now the NAM and Exxon and Shell say, well, if we can't earn any money, we can't pay for the houses anymore. That's what they say.
Well, I hear shareholders extracting value right there. I hear the extractive model of business, and we all know that Shell and Exxon are not exactly poor cousins.
Right.
So
That's what I thought.
this is power. As I understand it, the way you're described, this is power relationships. And to me, it's the last gasps of the fossil fuel industry extracting all the money it can from its old business model. And it's one we want to say goodbye to as fast as possible.
Okay, I agree.
Do you think it's... You can clap. Do you think it's now inevitable that, you say it's the last gasp, will this end in a short enough time that perhaps won't help Gert and his residents, but actually this problem will be solved because, for example, gas will no longer be a thing, fossil fuels will no longer be necessary? Or do we have to keep being an activist like these folks and lobbying to make it happen?
Oh, I think we definitely have to keep being activists. I often say, don't be an optimist if that makes you relax. Technology will solve it. People are ingenious. Don't worry, things will be okay. No, they won't be okay if we all sit back. But don't be a pessimist if that makes you give up. Oh, it's too late. Let's just go watch telly, right? Neither of those is going to get us anywhere. Stay in, be an activist, and ask, what action can I take? It's fantastic that yourselves, your community, are putting pressure and raising this. And, you know, in the UK, everyone's heard of, I don't know if I can say it, Groningen. But we've all heard of it. Was that okay?
Even worse, Overschild.
Sorry? I can't say, but we've heard of it.
That's our village. Overschild.
We've heard of, Overschild, yeah. We've heard of it. We know of this because people know this is a case where the citizens experience earthquakes as a result of this exploration. We've heard of you. Your work has impact internationally, and I have no doubt that it inspired the people of Preston to say, we don't want this here, because we've heard of it happening elsewhere. So it pops up, and those connections of civic action inspire each other, and we create a network.
So keep being an activist.
Keep at it.
I promise.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gert de Vries. And I'm watching the time and going, oh my God, where is it going? Because I know you have to be on the last train home to get back to, I think you're going to the UK. So
No, I'm not. I'm going to Utrecht.
Oh, Utrecht tomorrow?
Don't send me back to the UK yet, please.
No, okay, we won't do that. Does that mean we can keep you?
I will stay. I'd love
Fabulous.
to stay.
Let's go straight into the fourth film on behalf of the province of Drenthe.
Mijn naam is René Donkerbroek. Ik werk bij de provincie Drenthe, team Economie. En vanuit die rol ook actief in de betekeniseconomie. Daar zijn we een jaar mee bezig nu. Heel voorzichtig aan, pionierend, maar het krijgt steeds meer vorm. De betekeniseconomie is voor mij een economie waarin impact voorop staat. En impact moet je denken aan sociale impact, economische en ecologische impact. Vanuit die betekeniseconomie kunnen we echt waarde toevoegen aan de maatschappij op een ondernemende manier. Waar we tegenaan lopen is dat we weliswaar met een nieuwe manier van kijken naar de economie, dat we daarmee bezig zijn. Maar dat we tegelijk in een context zitten die niet gewend is om zo te kijken. En daar hebben we, vind ik, als overheid en als overheden echt het lef nodig om buiten onze grenzen te kijken, die grenzen over te stappen, met ondernemers om tafel te gaan, met particulieren, met initiatieven. En als een bondgenoot ook naar een maatschappelijke opgave kijken, waar zijn we mee bezig, waar kunnen we als overheid jullie mee helpen. En dat betekent echt een stukje lef tonen en echt buiten de lijntjes kleuren, want zonder dat komen we er niet. Hoe kunnen wij als overheid onze rol in de donut-economie spelen?
And because the province of Drenthe is one of the major sponsors of this event, they were worried about any potential conflict of interest, blah, 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 blah. So I'd like to invite on stage, here she is already, Ingrid Segers van, believe it or not, Circular Friesland. So we're crossing to the other side of the country. Please join us.
Hi.
Now, Ingrid, you've worked a lot with local and other forms of government, so you're well equipped to have this discussion. And what it strikes me is a government really lives in two worlds, right? They still have to live in the old world to keep our towns and our cities and our regions safe and, with energy and people in work and in hand. And yet at the same time, we can see that they're struggling with, we know we need to get into a whole new world. But doing those two things at the same time seems, dare I say, impossible?
Certainly not. As I can say for Friesland, and I'm proud to be part of that, Friesland, but also Groningen and Drenthe are now taking up both journeys. So they recognize there's still a current state, but they are also drawing positive roadmaps to do good.
So why are we here on stage to talk about this? What are the challenges they're facing?
Well, the question was, how can we as the authorities play a role in the donut economy? Well, I was asked to answer that from my perspective.
Okay, can I ask if the slide of the embedded economy could be put up on the diagram? Because I was fascinated by some of the things that René said in the... Oh, thank you. Excellent assistance backstage. Thank you, guys. René said, we are the authorities, how can we help? This immediately reminded me of something a very powerful man said 38 years ago. Ronald Reagan, when he was elected to power and the President of the United States in 1980, he said, one of the most frightening things that you could hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Well, I don't want to clap him because he was trying to say, roll back the state. The state is a bad thing. Let the market do everything. He was all about the market, and the state is interfering, the state doesn't know anything, roll it back. And Reagan and Thatcher together told that story again and again and again. So what we got was almost a self-hating state, certainly in the UK and in the US. Sell it off, privatize everything. State is incompetent. Let the market take over. Well, I grew up in that country, and I tell you, the market took over and it made a lot of mistakes, and we all saw that in the financial crisis. From there, I think we moved to, well, the market must lead, the state can be enabling. Sometimes the market can't do everything, there might be failures, so the state can come in and tidy up after it. But now we're moving to a very different place that says it's not just about the market and the state. Oh, there's the household and there's the commons. And now we need what some people like Michelle Bowens call a partner state, where the state is actually regaining respect for who it can be, throwing off Reagan's inheritance, and saying, you know what, look around, the state is actually fundamental to providing public services, to providing infrastructure. State often invests where the private sector won't go. The private sector won't touch it until the state has taken all the risk out of it, and then the commercial companies come in. And the author Mariana Mazzucato has written a fantastic book about the entrepreneurial state, the state as an entrepreneur, as a risk taker. So I think we're moving into a third, much more interesting phase where the state, local to national, recognizes it's essential, but it sees itself as a partner to the commons and enabling the commons as much as enabling the market. So for me, that's the frame we're working in. And then what René was talking about, we have a new way of doing things. It was like, we come from an extractive economy and we are trying to help create a generative economy, and we're running into that psychological drama every day. So that's, for me, the frame it sits in. And I think some of the roles of the state I know are, you can use state-level procurement to buy via the circular economy, to buy via local small and medium enterprises, to empower them that way. In the United States, employee-owned companies are given a tax deduction because in some states, the state has realized that employee-owned companies are sticky. They stick around because they belong, they're part of the community. They don't just up and leave when the wage rate falls somewhere else. So there's all sorts of different things that the state can do and enable that community network to grow, to thrive, create common spaces, enable a local network, have an open digital network that's based on open source data so that it becomes transparent and really invites the government as an ally to the commons. So I really loved many of the ways that René talked about the drama of that transition. And I'd love to hear from your point of view, what is possible, what's being done, and where are those challenges still sticking?
Well, just to elaborate on what you're saying, I absolutely believe the state is a crucial partner and they are the enabler of the commons. And what we see, for instance, for procurement, in the national guideline is that governments have 10% circular purchasing by 2023. What we said, nah, 10% by 2023, that's too little too late. So all our members, which are at least 1/3 of all our members is the governments, we actually challenge and they pick up themselves to have already 10% in 2020 or even go beyond. And we help them with programs, but also 40 or 60% of our members are actually companies, and we make a catalog in which the government can be the launching customer for those kind of entrepreneurs and really give them already a running start. So absolutely be a launching customer, but we also challenge them to have a longer scope. Instead of a business case on 2 years, have a business case on 5 years, beyond your own term of election.
Brilliant.
Go beyond, set the criteria, set them on both social as well as ecological impact. So we train actually the people in the government how to do different tenders. Whereas usually it was still on price, suddenly the price become a fixed variable, but the positive impact on social and ecological becomes the criteria on which you give the tender away. So these kind of things we do. We ask governments actually already to mimic the new economy where possible. I mean, in the new economy, taxes on labor will be reduced at the expense of taxes of resources. Can we create actual subsidy contracts in such a way that they mimic that new kind of economy? For instance, biological food. We just had 1 week of biological food in which the companies themselves paid the taxes of 21%. And suddenly the lift uptake is immediately. If we would do either circular products or biological products on a different tax regime, immediately the whole financial incentive would be already in place to drive that innovation. And then also we actually ask the governments to be an innovation partner. So really stick around for a longer period of time. And I was just looking at the earthquake film myself, and instead of pushing away the legitimate request from the citizens, what if this become an innovation hub where you make the best earthquake resisting housing or restoring them, and instead of pushing away what's rightful to them, treat yourself as an innovation hub where you, because earthquakes will always be everywhere in the world, and you in Groningen then have the experience to actually counter that with life-sustaining housing. So that's the kind of challenges and questions we ask.
Actually, just as the Dutch did with water challenges, right? We are the water management country of the world.
Yeah.
I've got a relevant question that's come in from the audience from Noor van Leeuwen. You were talking about purchasing and tenders. Then we've got to talk about the EU perspective. Becoming less relevant for the Brits in the world, of course.
Don't give us up on yet. Don't give up on us yet. It hasn't happened yet.
There is a certain amount that we can do and push locally, but there's also a lot that is handled throughout the EU, where lowest price is often one of the most highly weighted factors. How are we here, locally here in the north of the Netherlands, going to be able to have an impact against the EU to say, sorry, but we disagree with that?
I think it's about building up a network of citizens across Europe. And that's hard. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons, that's one of the arguments being used in the UK. Oh, Europe is too far away. We can't influence that. We want control back over ourselves. But when you can actually turn the power of European purchasing decisions in the right direction, wow, then you have ripple effects positively. I mean, Europe's work on the circular economy isn't as far as anybody wants it to be, but it's further ahead than many national economies are. They're lobbying to hold it back. Whereas at the European Commission level, they are pushing that forward. So I see stronger movement and progress at that level than many countries are ready to make themselves. To me, that's a reason to stay in and work as citizens and lobby at the level of the European Commission, because it's all about design. It's exactly as you just said, pricing is given a greater weight. There's nothing written in law to say that's the right way to make value judgments. Yeah. It's a design, and designs can be changed.
And just to build upon that, I think it's a Dutch invention. It's called Green Deals, where you can actually circumvent legislation, but you have to collaborate with several stakeholders in the chain and say, let's make a Green Deal really in favor of ecological and social impacts. And now the EU has adopted that as innovation deals, so make clever use of it, and they're desperately looking for examples where we can turn this around.
Speaking of desperate, I'm looking at that clock and thinking about your train. So I'm going to thank Ingrid for joining us. That was, for me, a fascinating conversation.
Really lovely to talk to you.
Thanks. This has all sounded, from my perspective, I hope from your perspective, fantastic, optimistic, hope. There are things we can do. There are things we are already doing. But I would be a terrible host if I didn't, on behalf of the audience, talk about some of the critique that you, and perhaps we should stick to the theory rather than you personally. This is just...
You can criticize me personally if that's what you want to do.
It's not me, it's just
We've
my
got
research.
3 minutes, but you can go for it.
Hardcore socialism in a new jacket. You're relegating politics to being an afterthought of economics. This is the most intellectually poor and annoying economy book I've read. Sorry about that. You're just another management guru using cliches. You believe that thinking different will change the world and that governments can be trusted. And yet, we've heard so much positivity today. So it's natural when you do something new to get critique, but I'm wondering what your perspective on that is.
So I don't know, I haven't heard half of those actually. What was that, socialism in a new jacket?
Yeah, hardcore socialism.
Hardcore socialism, I would say, you know, isms, 20th century isms don't help us think. Your capitalism, socialism, communism, they are intellectual baggage from the last century that actually stop us from seeing that the century we live in is completely different, with totally different technologies that transform the design possibilities. We also have utterly different knowledge about our dependence on a planet whose life-supporting systems we're rapidly destroying. I believe if Karl Marx, Adam Smith, John Maynard Keynes, you bring them all together, if they were alive today and I could show them that donut with the overshoot and the shortfall, I sincerely believe they would be the first to roll up their sleeves and say, man, we need some new theories. What? You're still using ideas I wrote 250 years ago?
Drunk in the pub?
Do we?
So,
I'll also just say, critique is welcome. And my husband often says to me, you know, if they're not criticizing you, you're not in the game.
That's true.
And you're only having impact when people respond. So criticism is welcome. When it's sort of slander and insult, I'd like to park that aside. I like to follow Michelle Obama, right? When they go low, we go high. You say, I'll just park the insult. Bring on the real intellectual content of what you're saying. I would love to respectfully disagree with anybody, because that is a privilege, to respectfully disagree and listen and learn. There's no reason why everybody should agree with these ideas, but I'm putting them out there and saying, if you have a better idea, bring it. Come on, let's collect them. We need them. This is teamwork. I've talked about economics. If somebody else wants to write a book about 7 ways to think like a 21st century politician, bring it on, because we need that book too. If you want to write a book about 7 ways to think like a 21st century engineer, please write that book. We need a collection of these. This is teamwork.
I spot a theme here. Are you giving us
are
you giving us an insight? Is this what comes next year?
Not from me.
Okay.
Please, somebody else write it. You know,
right.
No one person, I mean, crazy to come up with these ideas.
So we are out of time, but I've got one idea that actually came from the room from an economist, Ronald. He's in the audience somewhere. And he's asked a very simple question that says, isn't the donut inside out?
Some people have said, we need to draw this the other way around. If you want to draw it the other way around and people love it, go for it. Ideas evolve. They need to keep evolving. The donut will definitely look different than it does today in 10 years' time. But I have drawn it in terms of resource use, getting everybody out of that hole, because I think the outer circle and our brains find images very, very powerful for helping us understand ideas. And circles Deep in our soul, we know that the circle is holistic and there's something complete and contained about a circle. And when we burst over the edges of it, we understand that there's something about too much pressure. So actually, I've played around with people who've said, flip it the other way around, but I'm sticking with it. And I think it's about meeting the needs of millions of people in the world who still live in deprivation while coming back within ecological. And the shape of progress is no longer this ever-rising line of GDP growth. The shape of progress is balance. And we know it in our own bodies. Health is balance of calories, of exercise, of water, of cholesterol, balance. So it is for the planet. So let us use that as a profound metaphor for the 21st century, that progress is health, is balance.
What a fantastic way to end this conversation. Thank you so much. So, actually, I was just looking for you, and I'm hoping we've got Kees here as well. Is he around, or is he in the audience?
Also here, Kees.
Fabulous. I've got a microphone for Kees. Firstly, these guys, I've got a microphone for you, sir, wanted to make sure you didn't leave here without a gift from the North Netherlands. Shall we move forward away from all this clutter? You heard a little bit about them when Kees was talking. A local enterprise called Van Hully. They take old shirts and upcycle them or circular cycle them into boxer shorts. It is a ladies' pair. We did have to sort of guess the size, so I hope that... And this is the only pair in the world that can ever look like this, because of course that shirt was cut up.
Oh yes!
So the chances of finding
ladies boxer shorts.
Exactly.
I love it.
And if you have a quick sneak peek, you'll see they have been customized for you for this event.
I have to show you these.
With donuts.
That's hilarious.